I'm in Hazleton in Gloucestershire, to the right of Cheltenham, up near the top of Gloucestershire, and I'm looking at a Neolithic long barrow. There's two in this field. One was excavated by archaeologists in the 1970s and completely removed. There's been which you might be able to tell I'm quite annoyed about. I would have loved to have shown you what this place is and why it's so important, because it's changed our knowledge of the Neolithic. They've just done DNA tests of bones that were taken from here. Thankfully, the archaeologists did do a proper job and did actually record exactly where the bones were, and itemise them and so on. And since then, it's not the 1970s anymore, so it's we're able to do DNA tests. And what we've discovered is that the people who lived here were one family. That family was set up by one man. You can tell by the genetic data. And that man had four, let's call them wives. I think they quite in a modern sense they call them mates, but let's call them wives or partners. That man had four wives. We don't know whether they were consecutive. Each one died one after another, and then were all divorced. We don't know. Or they came all at once. It was polygamous. We don't know. But each of those four women, they and their children were given a special status, and their descendants. So it starts off with one man, goes through four sub-lineages, and on the chart you can see on the Guardian website, you can see they've given them four colours, each lineage, sub-lineage, and those four women were important, and the children were important. Two, not entirely, but there's a pattern. Two families were on the north side, buried in the north side of the burial chamber. It's a chambered tomb, and it's transept style. And two families were on one side, and the other two were on the other. Their bones were mixed up within, but there is a sort of pattern that goes on, which is quite hard to decipher. But what's curious is that, well, it's basically changed our knowledge of the Neolithic. All right, so the article writer goes on. Actually, it's worth actually seeing the paper and published on the Nature magazine website, which goes into more scientific detail. But what it says is that one man was special. He was the founder. The four women that he was married to or had a relationship with or whatever were important. Created four sub-lineages. There are no adult daughters buried here. I think there's 5 generations. So that suggests that this was in here for no more than 120 years or something like that. It was in use for no more than, well, no, people were being buried there for 120 years or less. We don't know whether there was other uses for the place afterwards. There is bits of Romano-British pottery, I think, if I remember rightly. But we know from Neolithic barrows that, I mean, I'm a 21st century man, 20th century really, and I'm here celebrating the place. So, people did all the way through history. So the daughters, the granddaughters, and daughters of the man that founded this place, they went off. They weren't buried here, which suggests they went off and married or had relationships in other villages. And it also shows that people who weren't related, proper blood relatives of the one or two, were brought in, males, as stepchildren. So it shows us, for the first time, we've got some idea of who were buried in Neolithic burial mounds. This does rewrite the history books. We did think that they were more egalitarian than the Bronze Age, but it does, to me, look like an aristocratic setup. It would have, if they owned quite a large tract of land, it would have taken a lot more people than 30, you know, well, less than 30. You know, it's only sort of 3 generations that will farm the land at once. So you would need lots of other people who weren't important enough to go in this burial. Probably. You do need less people we know they were really into cows. You do need less people to look after livestock than to farm for wheat and barley and so on. But it does suggest this is an aristocracy, or even kingship, we don't know. But anyway, yeah, I just thought I'd show you, because it's in the news, I thought I'd show you it. It's not much to see. It's there is a slight rise. It doesn't look like it's been completely obliterated. You can tell, I mean, in the last century it was 1.5 metres high in one area, and it's no longer that. It's a few inches at most. But this over here, you might just be able to see it over here, is and you had 2 chambered tombs together, 2 long barrows together in the same field, which is quite unusual. I don't know what it says. Maybe this was a boundary going through here, and people liked to bury people on boundaries, perhaps. Who knows? But I hope they don't. I hope when they do an investigation of that chambered tomb, that they don't demolish it in the same sort of terrible way they've done here. I mean, I think it's really irresponsible.